Hello again and welcome back. As you can see, we're back once more with the old Chevelle here. It's getting cold in Michigan. There's only 2 remaining open track days left. That gives us up to a maximum of 2 weeks time to get this thing ready, make it where it will pass tech inspection. I'd like to try to get it ready for this weekend. That way if we run into any issues, we have 1 more week to try to fix anything we identify. And then hopefully we'll be able to at least get 1 pass done in this thing. There is a lot to do, so let's get to it. So under the hood here, there's quite a bit to try to get squared away before we can send this thing down the track. Now, I've been trying to find the actual checklist that they use when they go through just their tech inspection so that we can run through it right now, make sure that everything is dialed in on this thing, and make sure that we're actually going to be able to get in the door when we show up. But I've been kind of coming up empty-handed. Now, they run under what's called the WDRA, and I'm much more familiar with NHRA-style tracks, and it's much easier to find the regulations and kind of checklists for the NHRA. For WDRA, I was able to find like tech guidelines for like if you run certain ETs, and the faster you get, the different kind of things your vehicle must have, but nothing really for just kind of the bare bones generic guidelines. So we may just end up leveraging the NHRA's kind of just generic checklist for that to go through all of that. And hopefully if we can pass NHRA's, we'll pass WRA's, whatever it might be. So that's kind of all I have to go on. But there's a couple of universals that I pretty much know off the bat here. One of those is to make sure your battery is actually tied down. We do need to pick up the bracket for that. I've got it on order from Summit. It's just kind of a little tiny bracket there that mounts to the back of the tray. And then it goes in the lip there on the back of the battery and just kind of holds the battery down into the tray. Now thankfully this battery that I stole out of my Austin Healey has the correct little lip in the back of it there, so once that shows up from Summit, our battery should be all taken care of. I do already have it bolted down to the inner fender, so that's going to be all nice and secure. We should have no problems passing inspection with the battery. One of the other big things on a track is they do not want you dropping fluids on the track if you can avoid it. So one issue I had was the power steering cap was broken, so I replaced that with a new cap. Here's the old one. You can see how the cap is kind of broken there. And it didn't seal very great, it didn't tighten down very tightly. So every so often fluid would kind of spray out of there or slosh out of there and start dripping around. So got the new cap installed there. Everything else on the power steering has been really tight and dry. Once I put those new hoses in there, the steering box hasn't leaked, the actual pump itself hasn't leaked. So cross our fingers that that holds together for us and I didn't just jinx myself. After that, we've got the cooling system. There's a lot to try to address there. One of the very obvious beginning issues here is if you follow the overflow here, you can see that it just runs straight down to the bottom and out onto the ground. That is going to be a big no-no at the track. They are not going to want antifreeze spraying on the ground. So I picked up just the most cheapest, genericest, crappiest overflow I could find off Amazon. We're going to get that installed in here somewhere. That way we're not spraying coolant on the ground if we start overheating for any reason. We've got a bunch of hoses I want to replace. I want to replace this kind of bypass loop right there with a new hose. Make that look a little bit nicer. Replace the little jumper right here. I mean, this one seems to be in okay condition, but I mean, it's just unknown age, so it's better to just replace it. That way we don't have to worry about it bursting on us. The upper here has already been replaced. This is nice and new. The lower over there, if you remember, is still the flexi hose. I do need to replace that. If you remember from the very early videos, I picked up a replacement hose. It was the wrong one, so I put the flexi hose back in there. Bought another replacement hose, and that one looks like it's the correct one, but I've just not had a chance to install it. So with all the coolant drained, it'll be a perfect time to address that. Then we can come over here to the driver's side, replace the temperature sending unit there for our gauge. Right now we just have the old kind of on-off switch style for the warning light system. We need to install the linear style sending unit, and that'll get our gauge working. After that, this thing really needs an oil change. If you remember from, again, the earlier videos, when we first got this thing running, it dumped like 10 quarts of oil through the oil filter and just sprayed it all out on my driveway. So after that I got kind of mad, just grabbed whatever generic oil I had laying around and dropped that in here, and that's what we've been running. It's pretty lightweight. It's either 5 weight or maybe 10 weight of some kind. I don't even remember exactly. But we get a little bit of a tick out of this thing. We definitely get some smoke through here. So I'm going to go ahead, change the oil. I might run an oil flush through here. It's going to be the BG's EPR, Engine Performance Restorer. It's one of the few that I know of that actually sort of does a relatively okay job of cleaning up some carbon and reducing smoke a little bit. I mean, I'm not hoping for a miracle here. We'll just run that through here, maybe take it for a little bit of drive. I think they say to put it in there and run it for like 10 minutes at 1200 RPM. But we'll just go for a little bit of a drive, put a couple of miles on it, get some varying speeds under there just to make sure it's made its way through the entire engine. Try to get a little bit of that carbon cleaned up, maybe get our rings to come around just a little bit more. And we're going to be putting a 2050 oil in here after that. So we'll take care of that. And I think that'll square us away here underneath the hood. I think that'll take care of all of our issues. Everything else is pretty much already tightened down. There's no other real major issues here up front. We have a tiny little bit of leak coming from the transmission pan, but it's pretty much about the size of a quarter after about a day. I don't think they're going to cause any issues or see any issues with that since it's pretty slow. But I do want to get under there and check our U-joints, make sure that they're nice and tight. I do not want to be dropping a drive shaft on this thing as we're going down the track. So we'll check all of that, see that those look good, maybe try to put a little bit of grease in those as well. Everything here on the front should be all greased up, but I still need to check the actual wheels here and see if they're grinding on those caliper brackets again. We had that kind of whirring sound in the last couple of test drives, so I'd just like to be able to pinpoint that, make sure it's not some kind of wheel bearing issue. In the fronts here, I have new wheel bearings, they're all nicely greased and packed up. I've checked those, they seem to be nice and tight, so everything should be good up here. I did check the rears here when I first got the car. They seem to be doing okay. I also have some additional fluid for back here. We'll check that level just to make sure it hasn't leaked. I checked it very early on when we first got the car and it had some fluid in it. But we'll go ahead and top all that off. Check the bearings back here again, make sure there's nothing going on in the rear here. Everything in the rear suspension wise is all new and it's been all greased up, so it should be all good back there. But some of this rust right here, I might come through and actually cut some of this out. Like there's this big piece right here that might just catch some wind and it's not really that well supported. So I don't want that to just kind of bend off and go flying on the track or anything like that. So might try to address a couple of those little things like that. And then I'll print off that NHRA checklist and probably go through it step by step just to make sure that we've got everything we need squared away so that when we show up, we don't run into any issues. We might go out, try to knock some cobwebs off of her one last time, get her a little bit ready for what's to come. I mean, pretty much even if the cobwebs are still there, we're going to send it down the track anyway just to see what happens, but maybe just get her a little bit happier once that oil change and flush has gone through. Maybe be a little bit less of a choo-choo train. But yeah, a lot to do, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got the new overflow can installed right here. I just took the old AC dryer out of there since it wasn't doing nothing. Dropped this in its place, just reused the factory brackets that were there for it. Seems to be working really well. Routed the hose here through the core support, through the existing hole. Got it connected up to the radiator there, so we should be all set on that side. So next up, probably try to get this coolant drained out of here, address all the hose issues, get that sensor replaced, and we'll just keep checking things off. So I poured a can of this here BG EPR down its throat. Directions here on the back say to basically bring it up to temp, run it for 10 minutes at a minimum of 1200 RPM. So we're going to kind of skip that. We're going to just bring this thing up to temp, go ahead and go get some coffee with it, do a little bit of drive. That should take about 10 minutes. That should get it hopefully a little bit cleaned up, but we'll get a cold start of this thing so you can see just kind of how bad she is when she first fires over. So as you can see, that BG's got its work cut out for itself on this one. This thing smokes quite a bit on these cold startups with just the tiniest bit of RPM in it. It gets a little bit better once it's up to temp though. So I'm going to let this come up to temp. I'm going to go ahead, run and grab some coffee, bring it back. We'll get that oil changed out. Hopefully by then my parts from Summit will show up and we can start tackling all the coolant system, get all that taken care of. I made it back from the coffee shop. The car ran absolutely beautiful. I did take it through a couple of back roads there, and I had an opportunity to kind of do about a 0 to 80 mile per hour run with it just to see how she did, just a little shakedown. And she's got good mannerisms. She doesn't really pull to either side or anything like that. Tracks really good, so that's always a good sign. It's pretty much the fastest I've had this thing up to this point. But when the secondaries kick in, man, oh man, do we have a smoke show behind us. It is unreal. Looks like something straight out of James Bond. So I'm really hoping this BG treatment helps that come around just a little bit, or we might be kicked off the track just for that reason alone. But this old girl's got a little bit of life in her. She really likes those shifts. She really likes to just chirp those tires for quite a while now if you really just stand on it. So we're gonna have some fun with this thing, just seeing what she can really do. I don't have a very high expectation, but I'm hoping she might surprise me. So I've got the oil draining out of here. I got some Castrol GTX Classic, the high zinc content, 2050. Picked it up on sale, so it was pretty much cheaper than the Rotella was that I usually throw in here, so couldn't complain. Got a nice Wix filter here to go in place of the Napa Gold that we're going to be taking out of here, which should basically be the exact same filter. So while I had it up in the air here, I was checking to see if this driver's side was grinding at all, and don't really hear anything on this side, and it sounds more like it's on the passenger side, so I'll probably try to get that tire up in the air as well, see if I hear grinding from that. Might try to get the wife in here to push down on the brake just a little bit and see if that induces any additional grinding, if the caliper shifts ever so slightly. But it does sound like it's coming from the passenger side, at least from what I can tell in the car, so didn't really expect to find anything here on this driver's side, but figured while I had the tire up in the air, I'd go ahead and check. So I'm gonna get this new filter installed here, level off the car a little bit, see if I can get any of that last little bit of oil in the pan to drain out. And then I'll go ahead and put the drain plug back in here. We'll top her off with the GTX. Probably fire up and let her idle a little bit and see how the smoke ends up being. Hopefully it's a little bit better. So I got everything buttoned up underneath here. I'm gonna go ahead and put in some BG MOA engine oil supplement. Yummy, because this thing needs all the help it can get. So hopefully this will help us out just a tiny little bit more. And that BG stuff smells terrible. There are lots of gurgling noises, so just gonna check underneath the car, make sure that's not leaking out. Nope, no drips, but I did forget to pull the oil pan out, so it's always a good thing so you don't run it over when you're leaving here. Let me go ahead and take care of that. All right, I've confirmed there's no leaks underneath the car, so let's go ahead and top her off. Can still smell that EPR. That stuff is strong. All right, let this settle for a little bit. Check our old dippy stick here. See if we need to add or remove anything, and well, that's interesting. Something I just saw and didn't notice before. Looks like we tossed our alternator belt here. I wonder when this happened. So yeah, that would have been nice to have our functioning gauge for in the car. Get an idea of when this occurred. I mean, I was keeping an eye on the voltmeter and that worked pretty much until I got home, and then I was just kind of revving it out in the driveway. And then when I backed it in, I noticed it was at 12, so I think that happened right as I was pulling this in. So we got really, really lucky with that, but we're gonna want to check and try to see why that occurred. We definitely don't want to be launching belts. So I got that belt reinstalled. It didn't look like it was too tore up from flying off. I'm definitely going to end up replacing that again and getting a spare to go along with it as well, since I do not want to toss that at the track or on the way back home from the track. Other than that, I did check the oil level. We're all topped off, so we should be good to roll this thing outside, get her fired back up again, just kind of letting this new oil run through it, and hopefully we get a little bit less smoke. So I ended up having to shut her down there. We ran into a couple issues. When I revved it to the moon again, sure enough, we launched our belt off of there. Pretty much the exact same as what happened last time when I got back from the coffee shop. I was just giving her a couple of good revs, just trying to knock the last of the cobwebs out before the oil change, and it tossed the belt. So not sure why that's happening. The alignment of the pulleys looks really good, so just gonna go ahead and replace that belt, try to grab a spare as well. Additionally, we ended up with a transmission leak here at the front. I think what happened was our belt, when it came loose, slapped into our transmission line there, and come to find out that it's actually loose. The fitting is not tight into the radiator, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten that up. That should take care of our leak. But on the smoke front in the back there, it looked really good. It looked like it was a whole lot less than what we've had, but it's still a little bit too early to tell. The engine is still pretty warm right now as well, so we'll see what that looks like tomorrow when we start her up when she's cold. Give her a couple of revs in and see what she looks like. But gonna go ahead, probably just put her away for tonight, run to the store, grab the belt there and the spare, and then once we get the spare parts for all the coolant system tomorrow, we'll pick it back up and see how she does. So as you can see on that cold start, smokes a whole lot less, especially when you give it a little bit of RPM, so definitely some improvements. We finally got our parts from Summit. They took a lot longer than they should have to get here. They used to use FedEx and stuff would just show up overnight. Now it's through UPS and it takes 2 to 3 days, unfortunately. So we're up against it here. The track opens up tomorrow at noon, and we have got a lot to do to try to get ready for this, so let's just get to it. So under the hood here, I'm just going to try to quickly knock this stuff out. We've got the battery tie down installed. That seems to be working really well. We should be perfectly fine with that. Got the coolant drained out. Been working on removing these heater hoses and the bypass hose here. You can see just how poor condition that thing was in, so it's a good thing we changed that. I do have a new alternator belt, so we'll go ahead and get that installed in here. Hopefully we'll stop tossing those. Then I've just got to get that sensor swapped out on the head over here. Top her back off with coolant, and then we should be good underneath the hood here. So I got the new lower radiator hose installed. That one did fit correctly. I've got the temperature sensor installed over here for the analog gauge inside the car. Installed the new bypass hose here on the water pump to the manifold. When I was trying to do the jumper from here to there, I discovered that the fitting here on the water pump is different than the size on the actual manifold, and both of them are rusted in there and pretty much stripped out, so I cannot get them out. So rather than fighting with that and ended up just breaking one of them off and being totally screwed, I just kind of created this messy little adapter system here, which hopefully they won't give us any grief about. I mean, it's all new hose chunks there. It shouldn't leak, and it's definitely better than what we had. So hopefully we'll be able to get by with that. So got the system here topped off again, just letting the air kind of work its way out. Gonna go ahead, start her up, bring her up to temp, make sure the gauge is working inside there, and hopefully we should be done here underneath the hood. So next up on the agenda here is getting seat belts in the car. Now they are never going to let us through tech inspection if we don't have some kind of restraint system, so it's pretty critical that I come up with something out of this. Now this is everything that I got with the car. It was all just kind of rolled into a bundle and thrown in the trunk. I don't know where any of it goes. That's why I've just got it all sprawled across the workbench as always, just taking inventory of it, trying to make heads or tails. I think I've got it figured out though. So I think these little pieces here, these retractables, go on either side of the bench seat. So I think this is going to be our driver's side right there. That one there is going to be our passenger side. Of course, the one we actually need, the driver's side over here, is missing the cover. Just the way it always seems to go. After that, it took me a little bit, but I think I got the buckles and kind of these little latches all figured out. So I think these here are all for the rear seat. And the reason I think that is because they don't have any boots on the back of them. So all of this would just go through the seat, kind of be mounted underneath in the trunk area or underneath the seat itself. Not going to be visible. Where these bundles up here got these nice little boots on them, and that makes sense because that's actually going to be in the cabin area just behind the seat. You'd actually be able to see that, so that makes sense why there's boots on them. Just trying to make sense of like where this stuff actually goes in the seats, try to figure some of that stuff out. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, but if we end up having too much of a headache trying to figure that out, we can probably just grab these rear seat ones and run it without those kind of plastic guides for now, since technically I think we only need 2 buckles and then the retractable piece here for the driver's side. And at first this was confusing me because there's so many buckles here. So you can see there's 5 buckles and there's kind of 1 additional little hook there. And then it dawned on me, oh yeah, we've got the shoulder belts in the car. Now for some reason I was thinking that these shoulder belts would just kind of clip into the same buckle, the same kind of as like the lap belt would connect into. I didn't know that they had their own individual buckle, but the more I looked at it, it started making sense. Okay, that's how it all connects together here. So there's going to be 2 for each seat for the driver and the passenger, and then this additional, the 5th with this little hook here, is what I call the youngest child seat. Now that's where I was always positioned growing up. I was the youngest of 5, always just right there in the center where it is the most uncomfortable ride you've ever had in your life. So I just need to figure out which side is which here, which one of these is for the driver, which one's for the passenger. It doesn't make a huge difference if I get it wrong technically, because really we just need the 2 buckles for the driver's side and that's it. So really I think I only need to worry about bolting in 2 things, just this retractable piece here and then just this little bundle of pieces there, or maybe the one above it. But yeah, shouldn't be too big of a problem. Just need to locate those bolt holes here. And I'm going to go and take a peek at the seat to see what kind of struggle it's going to be to get these little guides back in there, that sort of thing. That'll determine if I just rig something up with the rear seat ones instead or not. But I think we should be able to come up with something. So I think I got the seatbelt situation taken care of. I found the original mounting point for the little retractable portion here, just next to the seat. Got that mounted in. And then I put 2 of the rear seat buckles in up front here because it was just easier getting those through that tiny little hole in the seat. Much easier than trying to fit that big bundle and that plastic little guide through there. So this should be fine for right now. I've tested it out. It connects to the little retractable piece here correctly. It connects up to the shoulder belt correctly as well. So I'm just going to get in here, adjust on those just a little bit to make sure it's nice and comfortable. But it seems like we've got this taken care of. So just another thing we can check off. Still a couple more things to do. So let the car warm up and then cool off, checking the little temp gauge there along the way, and it seems to be fairly close. So everything seems to be working all right there. Hooked up my fuel sending unit as well at the same time. So now I can keep tabs on that. That seems to be about correct. That's going to come in useful tomorrow since it's about 40 miles to the track and 40 miles back. And then whatever we burn up actually running down the track if they let us. So that reminded me, since we put these new gauges in here and we have a working speedometer now, we also have a working odometer. We have put 19.9 miles on this thing since the cluster swap. So not a whole lot of shakedown miles just yet. I mean, it's 40 miles just to the track tomorrow. That's going to be by far the longest that this thing is driven at one point in time since I got it back on the road. So it is going to be a very, very busy day tomorrow for the old Chevelle here, but hopefully she holds together. So making progress here. Got a few more things to check. Hopefully we'll get this thing ready for tomorrow. We have finally found the source of our grinding noise, and it is not good. So I had inspected this brake when I first got the car. Everything was all together in place. It was pretty crusty, but it seemed like it was working, so I just kind of ignored on it. I was planning on going through and just replacing everything at some point. Yeah, never got there, and well, it looks like it has come to bite us. So yeah, this was a tricky one because I just jacked it up. I spun the tire around, didn't really hear it, but I knew it was on the passenger side. I checked the front tire, couldn't find anything up there, so I was like, I'm just going to take the tire off, drop the drum here, and take a peek inside, and it's a good thing that I did. So we've kind of got this little spring bracket here that's supposed to be flat, and it is just completely mangled up and has been just grinding away for some time in there. What a mess. So yeah, it looks like some other hardware in here might be a little bit bent out of shape and a little bit angry, so I'm just going to go ahead, disassemble all this, clean it up, see if any of the parts stores will have anything for this thing. Maybe we'll get lucky and can just slap this back together for tomorrow morning. Otherwise, we might just try to get it together and limp around with what we've got and hope it stays together, but yeah, not what I was hoping to find. We are back. It is track day, and we are nowhere near ready. We are really against the clock here. I've been on the road already this morning for about 4.5 hours, just trying to get all of the parts we need. And we have a lot of work to do to get this thing ready. It's about 10:30 or so. Track opens up at noon, runs till about 5, so if we're going to try to make it, we have really got to hurry, but things are bad back here. So to pick up where we left off, last night I discovered that the grinding noise was coming from this passenger rear brake back here. We took this apart and discovered that parts were just kind of everywhere in here. And I think it started with this here. And so this should be a lot bigger than what it is. I think it just broke off on the end back there, and I cannot find the actual end. So usually this kind of hangs up here off that hook. It's got a couple of springs that clip into it. But then there's a longer piece that comes off the back, and that would come down to the little adjusting bracket down here. And yeah, I cannot find the actual piece that comes down to this. So I think that's what let loose. And then when that let loose, it kind of let all of the hardware back here just kind of move around a little bit freer than it should have been. That allowed this kind of parking brake strut or a drum disc bar, or whatever you want to call it here, to kind of become loose. This fell out of its home, just got jarred around in there and jostled around, caused all manner of other issues. And yeah, so basically all the brake hardware back here just ate itself apart. However, that's not the worst of it. So I was going through all of this, cleaning up the backing plate back there, and then I noticed that. So yeah, the wheel bearing is completely shot on this thing. You know, I don't know if it got that bad just recently. I mean, I thought I had checked this when I first took all of this apart, when I first got the car. Before I even had it running, I took the wheels off, took the drums off. Just wanted to make sure that all the hardware was in there and that things didn't look too bad back here, so I knew what to fix, what to replace. And I knew that the axle seal was leaking back here, but I thought I could just kind of get away with it for now. But all of the hardware was here. So all of this brake failure happened during one of our test drives at some point in time. But as far as this wheel bearing goes, I think I did most of the testing here to see if that was loose with the drum and everything else on here and the wheel on there. I just kind of grabbed the wheel and was seeing if there was any free play in the wheel. So maybe that was masking what I was feeling, and I wasn't seeing as much movement because I was just kind of having all of the drum hardware in there, kind of keeping it a little bit more centered than it is. But yeah, that is really bad. We have got to try to address that here. So I've got to pull the axle apart here, get that cover off, get the C-clips out, pull the axles out. Hopefully the axles are okay, get new bearings in here, get the brakes assembled, and then try and make it to the track here, all within the next 3 hours or so. So a lot of work to do. So let's just dive in and get to it. So I've got the differential cover pulled off now. I was trying to find some marking on this ring gear here, and this is really all I can find Can't really make out what it is. It looks like a something 4 dash something else 44, so not entirely sure what those numbers are. Can't really make them out in person here. Hopefully the camera picks it up a little bit better here. But I've got the shaft there for the spider gears removed already. Got one spider gear removed. Gonna go ahead and pull out the other one, pull out those C-clips, get the axles out of here, and just keep trucking. So if you've never done the wheel bearings on one of these straight axles like this, they're not too terribly bad. Usually you can rent puller sets like this at pretty much any of your local parts stores. Pretty handy tools to have here. We got the smallest one right here. It's got this little head that swivels. Essentially you can just push that to one side, slide it in here, and that lets it get on the back side of the bearing there, and then it catches. Then you just kind of tighten everything up here. Get some tension on there. It doesn't have to be super tight. And this front portion right here is threaded so that you can hook up a slide hammer to it. And then you just use the slide hammer to basically just knock the bearing right out of there. So I'm going to go ahead, get this one knocked out, clean all this up, get the new one ready to go on. So this is what your finished result will look like. It'll essentially pull both the outer seal and the bearing out together all in one shot. So now I can get this cleaned up back there, go ahead and drop the new one in. New bearings installed, new seals installed. I greased up the outer seal here, so we're ready to reinstall this axle. Hopefully it's a lot better. I've got the axle slid back in place here, and it is nice and tight. There is no more movement. It rotates nice and freely, so everything should be good to go there. Next up, I'm going to start tackling the brakes over here. I'm going to get this wheel cylinder replaced since both of the little rubber seals on each side are pretty much gone. Cleaning some of this up just a little bit more, start getting this reassembled, and then we're going to move over to the driver's side, and I'm just going to knock that side out off camera since we're up against the clock here. It'd be really foolish of me not to go ahead and take care of that side since I've already got the differential apart. So just going to try to blast through that, see if we can get this thing done in time. We're getting really tight on time. I think it's right around noon now, so we're really pushing it. I've got the brakes all put together over here on this passenger side, the new wheel cylinder installed, everything is adjusted, so I should be good now to button all of this up, then go and do it all over again on the driver's side. It's taken a lot longer than I hoped. Fighting with these springs is just a nightmare sometimes, but slowly making progress. It's around 12:30 right now, so it is not looking good for our chances, but I'm just going to keep trudging on here. So on the driver's side here, everything looks to be okay for the most part. The wheel seal over here wasn't blown out. It's just a lot of dust and cobwebs. The bearing over here is in good shape. There's no play, no slop to it, but we're going to replace it anyway since we've already got the differential apart. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that out. So I'm making some decent progress here. I've got the driver's side all assembled. I've got the new bearing and seal installed, all the new brake hardware, a new wheel cylinder. I went ahead, put the differential back together. It ate up a lot of time getting those spider gear shims in there again. But I've got the differential cover all back on there. Got it full of fluid, so we're all set there. I just need to get the drum on this side, adjust on it a little bit, get the wife out here and bleed the brakes. But we are running out of time. I believe it is right around 2 to 2:30 right now. So even if I hustle to the track, I don't know when they stop letting people in. But if we can, we're going to try to make it. It's starting to look a little dark outside and a little cloudy, so I'm hoping that the rain is not moving in. We are really against the gun here, so I'm going to go ahead and try to button all this up. I've got the car reassembled, bled the brakes, they should be all set. We should be good to go. It's pretty late, it's around 3 to 3:30. I need to check and see what time they're open until. I don't know that we're going to get in. It may just be a bit too late. It is looking really dark outside. So unfortunately, as you can see, things were just not meant to be. Even if I would have gotten the car finished up a little bit sooner, by the time I would have gotten to the track, I would have been rained out. So it was just not meant to be this weekend. We have one more opportunity coming up next weekend. There's another open test and tune night. I'm going to try to have the car all ready for that. That gives us one more week of shakedown runs. Very frustrated with myself that I did not catch that brake exploding and that wheel bearing being bad sooner. So, bit of a frustrating end, but at least we've got a couple of things fixed. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you next week.